I strongly condemn the violation of Lithuanian airspace, and we have to react to this.
Russia didn't suddenly wake up and decide Lithuania was dangerous. What unsettles Moscow is something more uncomfortable than a new enemy. Lithuania is becoming a problem without firing a shot, without dramatic headlines, and without giving Russia a clean red line to respond to. And that is exactly why it matters. Because on NATO's eastern edge, one of the alliance's smallest members is quietly doing what Russia has spent decades trying to prevent. It is closing off options, not with threats, not with posturing, with preparation. And in Russia's style of pressure, preparation is the one thing that ruins the plan. Lithuania is not preparing for a symbolic standoff. It is preparing for pressure, disruption, hybrid attacks, and the gray zone playbook Russia has used across Europe and Ukraine. And unlike many countries, this Baltic state is not reacting late. It is building a system designed to be hard to intimidate, hard to destabilize, and even harder to isolate. From Moscow's perspective, that is a serious problem. Russia has always been effective at exploiting hesitation. It is far less effective when a country prepares early, integrates tightly with allies, and pulls society into the defense plan. That is what is happening here. This frontline NATO state sits in one of the most sensitive locations in Europe. It lies between Kaliningrad, Russia's heavily militarized exclave, and Belarus, Moscow's closest military partner. It also sits beside the Suwalki Corridor, the narrow land bridge linking the Baltic states to the rest of NATO. For years, Russian planners treated this region as a pressure point, a place where speed, ambiguity, and surprise could create leverage before NATO could respond in force. Vilnius knows that logic, and instead of betting on deterrence alone, it has acted on a lesson Ukraine forced the whole continent to learn. The timeline matters. After Crimea in 2014, the Baltics started warning that the next fight would be about speed and confusion. Not always about tanks first, about pressure first, about uncertainty first. After the full-scale invasion in 2022, those warnings turned into policy. Hard budgets, hard planning, hard infrastructure. And by the mid-2020s, NATO posture began shifting from symbolism toward readiness, with heavier forces planned forward, stronger regional integration, and real defensive depth being built. Preparation has to come before the crisis. Lithuanian officials and NATO planners describe the threat in blunt terms. Not tanks tomorrow. Constant low-level pressure meant to wear systems down over time. Information attacks, airspace incidents, border provocations, infrastructure stress, psychological pressure, all kept below the threshold of open war. And that below the threshold part is the key, because that's where Russia has historically tried to win without triggering the full weight of NATO response. Not by conquering territory outright on day one, but by destabilizing the target so badly that the political system hesitates, the public loses confidence, and allies start arguing about what's even happening. Western reporting and regional security assessments have described the country as facing persistent hybrid pressure from Russia and Belarus, often not dramatic enough on its own to trigger Article 5, but persistent enough to test resilience and reaction speed. Flights disrupted by objects drifting into or near airspace, border areas probed by smuggling networks and deniable actors, information campaigns aimed at undermining trust in government and NATO. This is not random. It follows a familiar pattern: probe, observe, adjust. What is different is its response. Instead of treating each incident as isolated, the Baltic state treats them as parts of one long campaign. Each disruption feeds into planning, training, coordination, and faster decision-making. Borders are reinforced not only with fences, but with layered obstacles meant to slow movement and complicate infiltration. Fortifications and obstacle planning are increasingly coordinated with Latvia, Estonia, and Poland, because the Baltic problem is not national anymore, it's regional. And NATO's presence and planning in the region have expanded as well, with more exercises, more integrated command structures, more forward posture, and long-term allied commitments that are designed to remove uncertainty during a crisis. But the development Russia finds most inconvenient is not hardware. It is societal preparation. The Republic is moving toward a total defense model, where civilians are trained to function under pressure, recognize hybrid threats, and keep daily life working even when systems are stressed. Not panic, not propaganda, preparation. From Moscow's point of view, this shrinks the gray zone. A society trained to endure disruption is harder to shake. A country that expects coercion is harder to coerce. A NATO member that fuses civilians, infrastructure, and allied forces into one defensive ecosystem leaves fewer openings to exploit. Quick pause. If you're enjoying this breakdown, subscribe. These kinds of videos take time and it really helps the channel. All right, back to it. Geography amplifies all of it, but it is worth saying cleanly once. The Suwałki Corridor is the narrow land connection through Poland that ties the Baltic states to the rest of NATO. On one side is Kaliningrad, on the other is Belarus. That does not guarantee anything for Russia, but it creates temptation, because isolation is a pressure tool. Isolation doesn't have to mean permanent occupation to be effective. It can mean logistical disruption, political panic, delays, a crisis atmosphere where the Baltic states feel cut off, and Moscow tries to negotiate from a position of manufactured leverage. That scenario only works if NATO is caught flat-footed. This country is making sure it is not. Instead of relying on reinforcements arriving after a crisis begins, it has pushed NATO toward presence and preparation. Heavy forces planned forward, joint planning already active, defensive depth built in advance. Speed matters in modern warfare. Delay kills surprise. Lost surprise buys time. And time gives NATO space to respond decisively. From Moscow's perspective, a corridor once seen as leverage is turning into a constraint. That same logic applies along the border with Belarus, including places like the Dieveniškės Pocket, a narrow Lithuanian protrusion surrounded on three sides by Belarusian territory. Analysts have long flagged it as vulnerable to deniable actions, provocations, and confusion tactics in a crisis. It did not ignore it. It reinforced it. Surveillance expanded, infrastructure hardened, military support integrated more closely with border security during periods of heightened tension. Again, the pattern repeats. Pressure, observation, adaptation, and with every adaptation, Russia loses another lever. Russia is not waiting for tanks to cross the border. It does not need to. Because the pressure this Baltic state is facing right now is the kind Moscow prefers to use first. A steady campaign below the threshold of open war. No declarations, no dramatic escalation. Just probing, disruption, constant stress, and one simple goal. Find the weak seams before crisis forces them into the open. Lithuanian security officials, EU monitoring bodies, and open source assessments describe the same general pattern. Activity designed to test responses and map vulnerabilities without crossing a line that would automatically trigger NATO's collective defense. And the reason this matters for the title is simple. This country is not just being harassed, it is being measured. One of the most visible tools has been airspace harassment. Over the past 2 years, Lithuania has reported repeated incidents involving small objects drifting into its airspace from Belarus. Some were described as weather balloons, others were linked to smuggling routes. Several incidents triggered temporary disruption around Vilnius, forcing civilian authorities and security services to respond quickly and visibly. The government did not treat these events as harmless. The point was not destruction, it was disruption. Each incident forces rapid coordination between civil aviation, police, border services, air surveillance, and the military. It tests radar coverage, response time, command authority, and political thresholds. And it tests something else that matters just as much: public confidence. Because hybrid pressure is not only about what happens in the sky, it is about what happens in people's heads afterward. Do citizens feel protected? Do they feel the state is in control? Do they believe the next incident will be handled as cleanly as the last one? Alongside that has been the information layer. Lithuanian and EU officials have repeatedly warned that hostile media ecosystems tied to Russia and Belarus push narratives aimed at discrediting the government, questioning NATO's reliability, and amplifying internal divisions. These efforts are rarely about inventing one giant lie. They are about flooding the space with doubt, targeting identity, targeting trust, targeting cohesion. This follows a familiar pattern. Before pressure becomes physical, it becomes psychological. Then comes a layer that is easier to miss because it often appears as separate incidents rather than one dramatic event. Cyber and infrastructure disruption, not as a single knockout blow, but as a way to test how a society behaves when systems are stressed. What happens if communications are disrupted in one region? What happens if a public institution is hit with a cyber incident? What happens if a service is temporarily unavailable? How quickly does rumor fill the gap? How quickly do agencies coordinate? This matters because Lithuania sits on routes that become strategically valuable in a crisis. Transport corridors, rail links, ports, energy connections, and the connective tissue that ties the Baltic states to the rest of Europe. When those systems run smoothly, it is hard to isolate. When they are disrupted even temporarily, reinforcement becomes harder and public confidence becomes easier to target. That is why hybrid pressure does not have to win to be useful. It only has to reveal where friction forms. Then there is the border itself. Lithuania shares a long and irregular boundary with Belarus that cuts through forests, rural areas, and complex terrain. Analysts have long identified certain areas as sensitive, including the Divanishka's pocket, a narrow Lithuanian protrusion surrounded on three sides by Belarus that can be used for provocation and confusion in a crisis. The concern here is not a classic invasion scenario. It is deniable action, limited incursions, manufactured incidents, moves designed to create hesitation and competing narratives while the political system argues about what is happening. And one reason Lithuania becomes a serious problem for Russia is that it has learned to treat that kind of move as a category, not a one-off. It has responded by reinforcing surveillance, hardening border infrastructure, and integrating military support with border security during periods of elevated tension. Once again, the sequence is clear. Pressure, observation, adaptation. But here is the part Moscow did not want. Instead of creating fear or hesitation, this pressure is accelerating its transformation. Rather than treating each incident as a one-off problem, it treats them as data. Each disruption feeds into training, planning, and coordination. Each provocation sharpens readiness instead of dulling it. That is dangerous for a strategy built on ambiguity. Hybrid pressure works best when targets are fragmented, slow to coordinate, and uncertain about attribution. Lithuania has moved in the opposite direction. Police, border guards, military units, civil aviation authorities, and intelligence services now coordinate routinely. Military support to civilian agencies is not a rare emergency measure. It is increasingly normal practice. From Moscow's perspective, that normalization matters because it shrinks the window where confusion usually lives. Once ambiguity shrinks, leverage shrinks with it. There is another layer that matters because it shows how pressure can scale. Migration pressure. Lithuania was one of the first countries to face the weaponization of migration via Belarus, when large numbers of migrants were pushed toward its border during earlier phases of the crisis. That episode forced the state to declare emergencies, harden border controls, and integrate military assets into border enforcement. Many analysts view that period as a rehearsal, not because the same thing will happen again in the same way, but because it revealed a method, stress the system, force impossible choices, generate political noise, and measure response. It learned from it. Legal frameworks were adjusted, border barriers were expanded, response protocols were refined. What once created chaos now triggers coordinated action. From Moscow's perspective, this is a problem. Hybrid pressure is meant to soften a target over time. Lithuania is turning it into a training environment. The Baltic state is becoming a serious problem for Russia because it is steadily removing Russia's preferred early options. The total defense model is the centerpiece of that. Its strategy is not just to defend territory. It is to keep society functioning under pressure and make intimidation fail. At the base level, civilians receive training designed to prevent panic and paralysis. Courses focus on recognizing manipulation, staying calm during disruption, and maintaining continuity when systems are stressed. These are not combat programs, they are resilience programs. Beyond that, it expanded specialized training in areas relevant to modern conflict and crisis response, including drone awareness and operation, crisis communication, and high-stress first aid. The point is not to turn civilians into soldiers. The point is to widen the country's ability to see, adapt, and endure, even if a crisis starts with confusion instead of bombs. Then there is formal defense participation. Lithuania maintains conscription, and it also relies on volunteer and reserve organizations, most notably the Lithuanian Riflemen's Union. This is not a ceremonial group. It is a structure designed to reinforce territorial defense, local continuity, and crisis response. Programs that include youth civic defense education are framed as resilience and national preparedness, not combat training. The idea is simple. In a crisis, a society that understands what intimidation looks like does not freeze. From a Russian planning perspective, this changes the entire equation. Coercion depends on speed, compliance, and administrative control. It assumes a population that hesitates, disengages, or waits for instructions. A trained population increases friction. It complicates logistics. It slows consolidation. You cannot decapitate a society that is distributed by design. This is why Lithuania's approach matters inside NATO. Rather than relying solely on reinforcements arriving later, it is building the capacity to resist and function from day one. That buys time. And time is what lets NATO respond decisively. And then comes the shift Russia hoped would never become permanent. Germany has announced plans to establish a long-term forward presence in Lithuania built around a heavy armored formation with deployment and readiness milestones set across the second half of the 2020s. This is not just another rotation. It is a signal of long-term posture. Operationally, heavy forces change the nature of the first hours of a crisis. They anchor defense. They raise the cost of any attempt to move fast. They reduce the value of ambiguity. Politically, it does something even more important. It makes escalation multinational immediately. Lithuania is no longer a distant flank where Russia can hope NATO hesitates. It is a connected node inside a wider structure. Poland provides depth from the south, Sweden strengthens the Baltic Sea, Finland secures the north, Latvia and Estonia coordinate planning and fortification. And NATO's ability to see and share information across the region has improved sharply since 2022. The effect is layered. Civilian readiness reduces the impact of hybrid tactics. Border defenses slow movement and shape risk. Lithuanian forces absorb initial pressure. Allied heavy forces raise the price immediately. NATO reinforcement becomes faster once time is bought. That brings the story back to the Suwałki corridor in the only way it needs to be said now. For years, the corridor was described as a vulnerability because isolation could be used as leverage. Lithuania's preparations and NATO's posture are steadily reducing the chances that leverage can be created quickly or quietly. This is why Russia does not see Lithuania as a threat in the traditional sense. Moscow does not fear Lithuanian power projection. What it fears is limitation. Lithuania is turning itself into a constraint. A country that is prepared is harder to coerce. A society trained to endure disruption is harder to shake. A NATO state with permanent allied heavy presence is harder to isolate. Russia can still pressure Lithuania. It can still probe. It can still try to create friction. But the payoff is shrinking while the cost is rising. That is not deterrence through fear. It is deterrence through friction. Lithuania is not provoking Russia. It is denying opportunity. If Russia escalates, the response is immediate. If Russia stays below the threshold, pressure leaks away. If Russia waits, Lithuania keeps building. From Moscow's perspective, that is suffocating. Because power is not only what you can do, it is how many options remain open. Lithuania is quietly closing them. Not loudly, not dramatically, but deliberately. This video is based on publicly available information, including official government statements, NATO publications, reputable reporting, and open source security analysis. It is presented for educational and explanatory purposes to discuss deterrence, defense planning, and regional security dynamics. It does not promote violence, hatred, or conflict, and it does not claim certainty about future events.